Oh boy, this question is really scary. So we're going to take advantage of our SAT knowledge here to help us. So if we haven't read the passage, which is the strategy I advocate, then we would not know where to look for this very specific science-y fact, and that can be overwhelming. But remember that we have a rule that can guide us in these situations, what's known as the chronology rule, that the questions are generally in the order in which the answers appear in the passage. And so far we followed that. We've kind of worked our way through the beginning, and now we get to this point where we don't really know where to look, but we're going to use the other questions to our advantage. So first and foremost, question 46, that sent us to lines 15 to 31. So I might start reading after line 31, especially because I don't remember reading about the trigger hairs as much in the short amount of time. It didn't really get into that specifics in the end of the paragraph, right? If anything, it asked those questions. How does the plant encode and store the information from the unassuming bug's encounter? How does it remember the first touch in order to react upon the second? So this question is going to answer those questions. Like, it's the same thing. So that's a good sign. So that gets us, that's 46. And then we would say, okay, well, where should we stop reading? Where should we expect to have found the answer? And 48 is also a no-line reference question, so it doesn't really help us. But that's okay, because it also follows the chronology rule, so we should expect the answers to 47 and 48 to be before line 67, or thereabouts. So let's mark that down. 67 is right here. So there we go. So somewhere in this zone, it's a lot. It's still, you know, what is that, 30 to 60 something? So it's like 30 lines. It's still a lot. So that's not great, but we're going to help ourselves by reading these lines with purpose, and hopefully something will come out of it. Now, the benefit, though, is still that it's still only half the passage as opposed to the entire thing. So we're not skimming everything. We're just looking at this half. And if we don't find it, then maybe we do need to read a little bit more. But I have faith in the system. I think it's going to work out. So what do we need to look for? Which statement best explains why the Venus flytrap requires a second trigger hair to be touched within a short amount of time in order for its trap to close? So second trigger and short time. Those are like the two things. Second trigger, short time. Those are the two ideas I'm pulling out of this question I'm going to need to look for as I read. So let's see. Now I'm going to read a little fast just so you're not watching an overly long video, but I'll kind of stop when we get to something that seems relevant. Scientists have been puzzled by these questions ever since John Burton Sanderson's early report on the physiology of the Venus flytrap in 1882. A century later, Dieter Hoddick and Andreas Sievers at the University of Bonn, Germany, proposed that the flytrap stored information regarding how many hairs have been touched in the electric charge of its leaf. Their model is quite elegant in its simplicity. In their studies, they discovered that touching a trigger hair on the Venus flytrap causes an electric action potential, a temporary reversal in the electrical polarity of a cell membrane that induces calcium channels to open the trap. So this seems important, right? They're talking about electric something, calcium. Okay. I don't need the specifics right now. It just seems that they're explaining why something happens. So, okay, maybe that's why the second trigger happens. We'll get into the details if we need to. So, okay. This coupling of action potentials and the opening of calcium channels is similar to the process that occurs during communication between human neurons, thus causing a rapid increase in the concentration of calcium ions. So far, nothing about the second trigger specifically, and nothing about time. So maybe this is important, but I feel like I would have recognized those concepts somewhere. Let's see if I find them in the part that's left. They propose that the trap requires a relatively high concentration of calcium in order to close, and that a single action potential from just one trigger hair being touched does not reach this level. Therefore, a second hair needs to be stimulated to push the calcium concentration over this threshold and spring the trap. The encoding of the information requires maintaining a high enough level of calcium so that a second increase, triggered by touching the second hair, pushes the total concentration of calcium over the threshold. As the calcium ion concentrations dissipate over time, if the second touch and potential don't happen quickly, the final concentration after the second trigger won't be high enough to close the trap, and the memory is lost. Woo! Wow, okay. Again, I don't necessarily understand what I've read, but I do know it seems relevant, right? They mentioned second trigger, second touch. They'd mentioned it a lot. They also got into concepts of time a lot. So main ideas are repeated ideas. They're clearly repeating ideas about the second trigger and the time that needs to happen. So this seems like the place to look. Now, I'm not going to read it again. I understood it enough to know that this is probably where I'm going to find my answer, and I'll come back to it with more information when I go to the choices. This is a key piece. The science here is very dense, very difficult to understand. You should not expect yourself to understand what you read the first time. I certainly did not. I don't care. I don't want to. If I really wanted to, I could slow down and try to figure it out, but I'm not going to do that because most of it might not matter. Because the choices here are going to tell me what matters. And so I can test the choices against what I read. That's much better than trying to read it and summarize it myself. Don't waste time coming up with your own summaries. The choices are summaries. Use the summaries that they give you and test them against what the passage says. So let's see. A, the second trigger produces an electrical charge that reverses the charge produced by the first trigger. There wasn't a reversing here. I thought it was over here. The electrical charge. Temporary reversal here in the electrical polarity of a cell membrane. But honestly, that's the only place where I saw that. So that's not a great sign, right? If this was, again, main ideas or repeated ideas, so if that were important, it would have come up before. But what did come up, or come up again, and what did come up again and multiple times, is that there's that idea of like a threshold, right? So they're talking about like getting more of the thing, not switching it, right? So the second thing seems to be adding more on. So this seems not related. Maybe if you were unsure, you would keep this in, but I'm pretty sure this is not the point. It's the word reversal. This idea of something being reversed is one little piece far away, a couple lines away from where I really think the answer should be. So that's not a good sign. Main ideas are repeated ideas. The second trigger stabilizes the surge of calcium ions created by the first trigger. Well, there's that word stabilize. Again, I thought that what I was reading was that it adds to it, right? If we go back to these lines, push the calcium concentration over the threshold. High calcium, right? Pushes the concentration over the threshold. There's that same phrase. Look at that. Main ideas are repeated ideas. It's literally the same thing. As they dissipate, the second tensions don't happen quickly. The final concentration won't be high enough, right? So we want to keep the concentration up. Stabilizing it wouldn't do that. That would mean keeping it the same. So that doesn't seem to match. The second trigger prompts the calcium channels to open. Well, no. The first trigger did that. The second trigger adds on more. So that seems backwards. So hopefully it's D. The second trigger provides a necessary supplement to the calcium concentration released by the first trigger. So maybe this is a little bit harder of a vocab word than I would like, but supplement means add to, right? So it's getting that idea across. This is definitely the answer. I have no doubt about that. But do I understand the science? Enough. I understand it enough. I get it. There's two hairs. One hair puts out some calcium. The second hair puts out more calcium. If you've got enough calcium, it closes the trap. Yeah, that's the gist. There's more to it, probably. Something about potentials and, I don't know, encoding information, and I don't know why the calcium matters. So yeah, there's other stuff here, but I don't care. I got it, right? We add on more. This says we add on more. Good enough for me. Good enough for the SAT, because that is the answer.